Hello and welcome to today's webinar on how to find out what your customers are really willing to pay. My name is Mark Peacock and I'm the founder and MD of Pricemaker, and we help business customers improve their pricing to increase their profits. So the agenda for today's webinar looks like this. So we'll start with a little bit of context about the current situation, particularly in the UK, that's causing businesses to need to rise their prices. Then I want to move on to the second point, which is to start with price. I'm sure you've heard of Simon Sinek's belief that you should start with why, but my belief is that you should start with price. And I'll explain what I mean by that in that section. Then we'll move on to how to ask questions about price. This is an area that I think people are very unaware of. How do you ask your prospects what they might be willing to pay and what's an appropriate price level? And then in the second half of the webinar, I'll be talking about a pricing research application that I use that enables businesses to research what customers are willing to pay on a large scale basis. And I've got 3 examples there to share with you. A B2B membership organization, a B2C training company, and a SaaS online service. And then we'll finish with a quick summary at the end. So let's get started. So the challenge at the moment for most business owners in the UK at the time of writing, if you like, in November 2022 is what should I be charging given that my costs are rising and I need to ensure we earn a decent profit next year. So you want to maintain or improve your profit margins, but equally you don't want to ruin your customer relationships or choke off your growth prospects. So what do? You could just put your prices up an inflationary amount, which at the moment is at about 10%, and hope that it sticks. But what if some of your customers object to that price increase? And what if your costs continue to rise next year above this level? What do we do? Here's a chart showing current inflation levels in the UK. I mean, there's some good news and there's some bad news in here. The bad news is that it's very high, as we know. It's currently at between 10 and 11%, and it might even go a little higher. The good news is, though, as you can see in the forecast, which comes from the Institute of Directors, it is forecast to start to reduce throughout the whole of next year, but it doesn't get back to target levels of 2% until October 2024, which is nearly 2 years away from now. So we've got to deal with this problem, right? It's not going to go away in the short term, and we need to know how we can manage these rising costs and do it in line with prices that our customers are willing to pay. Here's a chart that I like to share because it's really effective, I think, in terms of showing why pricing is so important. And they did a study a few years back now where they assessed a load of businesses and worked out what impact does a 5% increase have on any of their key metrics. So the key metrics are shown on the left on the chart. So you've got price, revenue, cost of goods sold, overheads, and R&D costs. And if any of those metrics are improved by 5%, you can see the improvement in profit, or EBITDA, as shown in the bar chart on the right. So, for example, in this study, if revenues or volumes are increased by 5%, profits go up by 12%. If cost of goods sold are reduced by 5%, profits are increased by 10%. If overheads are reduced by 5%, profits go up by 5%, and so on. It makes sense, right? Any improvement in any of these metrics will lead to an improvement in profit. Now, obviously, it will depend on the financials of your business, but largely this is correct. And as business owners, we tend to only focus on revenue growth and cost management, and we don't tend to look at the lever that's not shown there, which is price and the improvement that can have on your business. And generally speaking, price will have the biggest impact on your bottom line, on your net profits, than any other lever. In this case, a 5% improvement in price alone will generate a 22% increase in net profit. The other rule of thumb is McKinsey they famously like to quote that for every 1% increase in price, you get a 10% increase in your net profits. And when you think about it like that, what other lever do you have in your business that you can pull that makes such a difference to your bottom line? There isn't one. Yet, all too often, we shy away from using price as a lever for profitable growth. So let's just have a think about how businesses go about pricing at the moment, typically in terms of what's done. So we might start by identifying what our costs are. Let's say we have a unit cost to deliver a product or a service, doesn't really matter what. And let's say that cost is £100. And then we have a commercial goal of charging at least 50% as a margin. We want to achieve a 50% margin. So the price in that case needs to be £200. And then we look around in the market and we see our competitors, some of whom are charging a bit less than that. So they're charging £180. So we have a thing where we think, okay, well, maybe we should charge a bit less because we know we want to win the business, right? So we're going to charge £175. And that's very much a kind of typical approach that most businesses will take to working out a price. Cost plus margin, take into account what your competitors are doing, and then hope that the price that you've come up with for the customer is going to work. But the bit that's missing in that process is really finding out and researching what your customers are truly willing to pay. If you know, for example, from research and evidence that your customers are actually willing to pay £200, then what price should you charge them? £200. And that number is irrespective of what your costs might be. So how do we go about finding out what people are willing to pay? I just want to tell you a quick story that illustrates the power of finding out what people are willing to pay at the very start of a product design process. So back in the 1990s, Porsche was still just a sports car brand, so they only sold sports cars. And at the time, the car market was dramatically changing. There was a huge increase in the number of SUV vehicles coming onto the market. So BMW launched its X5 and Audi launched its Q7. So Porsche looked at this and they thought, well, maybe we could have a slice of this market. So they asked their customers two questions. Firstly, would Porsche customers be interested in a Porsche SUV? And then secondly, how much might they be willing to pay for such a car? And the answer they got back was, yes, Porsche customers are very interested in a Porsche SUV, and they'd be willing to pay 10% more than the equivalent cars from BMW or Audi. So Porsche got to work and they started designing the new car concept, and they tested every single feature and every single aspect of the car that they might produce. And they also asked the question, how much are customers willing to pay, or what value does it have in that sense? So when they finished the process, they knew that the car that they wanted to build, which eventually became the Porsche Cayenne, they would charge £70,000 for it, and they knew that they could sell about 40,000 units at that price. So it was launched and it was a great success. Now, the Porsche Cayenne and its derivatives now account for half Porsche's total annual profits to this day. So you can see, if they hadn't have gone through that process, they'd be in a far different place as an organization. So it was an incredibly successful car launch, and the reason it was successful is because they put price at the very start of the design process. How much are our customers willing to pay? On the other hand, the more traditional approach is what we see with many other car companies. So you might have heard of the Dodge Dart. It was actually an old classic car from the 1960s in America. And Fiat Chrysler, who owned the rights to this car, decided to repurpose it for the modern day market in the early 2000s. So they gave the project to their product and engineering teams, and they said, you guys know how to build the best cars. Off you go and come back and tell us when it's ready. So 18 months later, they have this lovely, smart, shiny looking sports car, and they created a TV advertising campaign that proudly proclaimed, we've kicked the finance guys out. implying money was no object. And they took the car to market with a great fanfare. It was aimed at the budget end of the market, so it had a sticker price of about $16,000, so not hugely expensive. Unfortunately, the car was a total flop, and it was rated the second biggest flop of that year, second only to Apple's mapping product when that first came out, which was a big disaster. And the problem is that they've done what everybody else typically does. They thought of a product, they designed it first, they built it, and then they worked out the unit cost and the price before taking it to market. And this is a back to front approach. So the lesson that we learn from this story is that smart companies design the product around the price. Now, this story comes from a great book called Monetizing Innovation, which is shown in the footnote there. And in it, the authors talk about how successful companies build great products by thinking about the price point first. So the old approach, the traditional approach, which the likes of Fiat Chrysler take, and probably some of you watching this webinar take, is that we think of a product first, then we design it, we build it, and then we put a price on it before we take it to market. But the trouble is, if you get that price point wrong, all of that prior activity is wasted. And also, when you do go to market, you might get your pricing strategy wrong. Whereas what the authors of this book argue is that you should design the product around the price. So very early on, you try and identify what's an appropriate price that somebody might be willing to pay for a high level proposition or product. Then we define the product that fits the price conceptually, then we design it, then we build it, and then we take it to market, already knowing what the likely price point is that people are willing to pay. And when you think about it like that, it makes a lot more sense, right? So we're designing a product in line with the price that people are willing to pay, rather than designing a product that we think customers want, and then doing the usual cost plus margin approach to calculate a price, which may or may not be right when we take it to market. So it's a very powerful story. It sounds a bit counterintuitive when you first hear it, but it actually makes a lot of sense. So the question is, well, how do we find out what we should charge? And basically, there's two simple rules here. The first one is that from a customer point of view, how people judge value is always subjective, and it's always in the eye of the beholder. So this is rule number one that we really need to understand. Value, like beauty, is always in the eye of the beholder. It's always subjective, it's always personal, and it's always changing. So therefore, rule number two follows. The only way to know how people judge the value and therefore the price of your product is to ask them. Now, this is what many businesses don't do. We make assumptions, we guess, we look at the competition, we do everything but ask our customers how much they might be willing to pay. So I want to share a few techniques that you can think about using in terms of how can you ask those critical questions. So pricing, people watching this webinar will be familiar with some of these, but typically speaking, generally amongst business people, business owners, these techniques aren't well known, but they're quite simple to understand conceptually. These aren't difficult, super advanced ideas. They're quite straightforward to understand. And the first one of these was invented by a Dutch economist called Peter van Westendorp in the 1970s. And basically his approach is to ask a sequence of 4 questions about price. So we start by describing the product that we want to ask the respondent to think about if they're not already aware of it. We get them to think about the benefits, the features, and the value that it can bring to themselves or to their business. Then we ask a sequence of 4 questions. Number 1, at what price would this product be so low that you'd start to question the product's quality? In other words, does the price point itself put you off the product? Number 2, What price do you think this would be a good buy? Would this product be a bargain? What's an appropriate price, or what's a really good offer for this kind of product? Number three, at what price does this product start to become expensive? Do you start to think, oh, okay, well, I might buy it, but it's getting pricey. And then number four, at what price is this product simply too expensive? There's no way, if the product was on sale at that price, that we buy it. And what that allows you to do is it creates a price range, a set of upper and lower price limits within which you can then decide where to pitch your prices for the product. So that works very well for new products. For existing products or services, there's another method called the Gabble-Granger method. And this assumes that there's an existing demand and an awareness about the level of price for that product or service in the market at the moment. And the technique here is to simply ask people how likely they are to buy this product at an ever-increasing series of prices. So we use the 5-point Likert scale there, from extremely likely down to not at all likely. And we might say, well, if this product costs £100, how likely are you to buy this product at £100? And then they answer and give an answer using one of those responses. And then you put the price up to £110 and say, how likely are you to buy it at £110? How likely are you to buy it at £120? And so on. And what this can do is effectively allow you to create a demand curve and understand the elasticity as the price of the product increases and what impact that has on volume. So those are two kind of quite straightforward questioning techniques that anybody can adapt into their business. And here's a really simple example that we did for a manufacturing client. They were selling a product into the construction industry. It was a brand new innovative product. So we spoke to 25 of their target customers. We described the product and all its features. And then we asked them the 4 Van Wessendorp questions. What's a cheap price? What's an appropriate price? What's an expensive price? And at what price point would this be simply too expensive? And we came up, as you can see here on the slide, with a series of price bands. And what this tells us is that the acceptable price range is between £80 and £150. If we go above £150, simply too expensive. Less than £80 would be too cheap. So now we know we've got our upper and lower limits for our price range. And when the product was launched, we had 3 price points of £90, £120 and £150 with different versions of the product. So we're capitalizing on people's different levels of willingness to pay. Quite a simple approach, and it can work for any business, particularly if you don't have the means to run large-scale service, for example. For those organizations that do require the pricing research to be a little more robust, there are tools out there that you can use. We use a platform called PriceBee, and the advantage of this product, this platform, is that you can do surveys very quickly, very effectively, by sending out an online survey either to your customer base, your email database, or the respondents can be recruited for you if you don't have access to an email database. So it's statistically valid. It uses proven methodologies, including the Van Wessendorp and the Gabble-Granger method, plus a few others. It works in most B2B and B2C markets. And the key thing is it provides you with insight, critical insight into your customers' true levels of willingness to pay. So I'm going to share with you a few examples of how that process works, just so that you can see what that looks like in real life. So before I do that, I just want to explain how to read the pricing charts that you get with this method. So there's always 2 curves on a pricing chart. You've got a chart that shows the optimum price to maximize revenue, which is the red line. And then you've got a chart line with an optimum price to maximize volume, which is the blue line. So you can see here in this example, you've got the price scale along the bottom, which ranges from 0 up to $20. And then you've got an optimization index scale from 0 to 100 on the left. And you can see here on the blue line, the optimum, so we're looking for the peaks. The optimum price for volume for this product is $4, and the optimum price for revenue is $8. What's also very helpful in this approach is we can see the price thresholds and the price cliffs. So you can see there's a big drop in price, willingness to pay, and therefore demand above $10. So that's really helpful to understand if you're a seller of this product, as we definitely don't want to be pricing our product above $10 because the drop in demand will be significant. And we can also use these changes in the price points and the curves to calculate effectively the price elasticity, so that we know, for example, that if the price was increased from $4 to $7, that demand would drop by 30% in this example. So it's very, very helpful, very powerful data. So here's the first example, which we conducted for a client in the UK, which was a B2B membership organization. So they had a large number of members, over 100,000, and we sent out a survey to all of their members, and we got around 3,000 responses. So it asks a series of questions about the value of the proposition and the levels of willingness to pay. And what we find is that we identified a willingness to pay of between £20 and £40 per month for the subscription to this organization. So if this organization wanted to maximize revenue, they should be charging £40 a month. If they want to maximize volume, they should be charging £20 a month. And you can see above £40 that demand would drop quite quickly and quite significantly. So there's a real price cliff at that £40 price mark. So there was lots more to it than this. I'm only showing you one slide from the overall exercise. There was lots of subsegments within the survey that we did. And interestingly, we found one of the subsegments that if we changed the price to £30, we could actually increase the demand quite significantly. So when we pulled all of the findings together, we found that when we did the modeling, comparing it to a baseline position to a projected position for the next 12 months, that we could increase revenues by 2% and volume by 4.7%. And that put a significant six-figure sum of improved contribution on their bottom line. So very powerful insights there. The next example is a B2C Training Services company. So the revenue curve here, you can see three very clear price peaks: £100, £200, and £400 for this training course that they offer. But their prices were already above £200. So they had three price zones in the country: a standard price of £239, a price in the southeast of £265, and a price in the London region of £325. And what the data showed, that particularly in London, they could clearly charge all the way up to £400 before demand really starts to drop off. But also what was interesting is if you notice on the blue line, the volume curve, the quantity line, even though the data, according to this chart, the data shows that we can increase prices to optimize revenue, it has very little negative impact on volume once we're past the £200 price point. So as they were already charging more than £200, we could increase prices quite considerably without any serious negative impact on volume, because the demand curve there is very flat all the way up to £400. So we increased price in London from 325 to 369, in the southeast from 265 to 299, and in the rest of the country from 239 to 265. So by about £30 per region. When we modeled the outcome of that, we achieved an average price increase of 12%. No material change in volume, which is what we wanted. We didn't want a drop in volume, so a plus 1% outcome is fine. But the real win was in the revenue growth. So all of that price improvement is generating nearly 14.9% improvement in revenue. And of course, that price improvement all falls through to the bottom line. So it made a huge difference to their bottom line, their gross profit contributions. The third example is not a study that we carried out, but it's available as an example on the PriceBeam platform. And I include it because I want to show that you can also use this approach to compare pricing for competitive products. So in this survey, which was for some online HR software management tools, the company, the researching company was Bamboo, and they wanted to compare themselves to SAP, which had an HR module of an equivalent product. And what you can see here is that the researched prices show that customers are willing to pay £128 a month for the Bamboo product and £144 a month for the SAP product. But what's also interesting is that you can see the line for Bamboo drops quite considerably after 128. So that's really the upper limit of price that they should be charging. Whereas the volume line for SAP stays flat all the way up to £144. It doesn't materially drop until about £165 a month. So they have much stronger pricing power, probably due to their brand awareness and their reputation. So therefore they can charge significantly more than Bamboo. So Bamboo need to work out what's their pricing strategy, what's their product development strategy, what's their competitive advantage, how are they going to win business against SAP given that situation. So incredibly powerful and helpful insights. So there we go. So in summary, the benefits of pricing research can be quite considerable. It can help you really find out what your customers are actually really willing to pay rather than trying to guess it. It's a proven methodologies using well understood pricing research techniques. And what's really great about this approach is that it's really quick. Once you've set up the survey, which can take a bit of discussion and a bit of work, but the survey itself is very fast to complete, and you get all of the results within a week to 10 days. You have access to an online portal, which allows you to review and analyze and segment all of your own data. And then additionally, and I haven't really spoken about much in this webinar today, is that you can segment all of your customers by whatever segments of data you've captured. So for the B2C Training Services company, we could see different levels of price willingness to pay by all sorts of different demographic segments. So age, income levels, household size, education levels, and so on. And there were lots of differences in there that helps the organization better understand their true core demographic that they should be targeting. You can compare products both within your product range, but you can also compare them to competitive products. And then finally, if you're researching a new market and you don't have a database of people you can contact, PriceBeam can recruit respondents for you if required by using their access to a whole range of online databases and panels. So there we go. That's the seminar for today. Hopefully, it's given you a few ideas about how you can find out what your customers are really willing to pay. And the message I would try and leave you with is don't be afraid of asking that question because it's really powerful. Remember the Porsche example. You want to be the Porsche Cayenne in your market. You don't want to be the Dodge Dart. Remember that it's far better to try and identify the price range than a specific price point, because once you understand an acceptable price range, you can design your price points within that price range. There's a range of techniques that you can ask and you can do it, that you can use, and you can do it both informally in terms of customer interviews, or you can do it using online surveys, which can be very, very fast and very effective. So therefore, there we go. Pricing is the most powerful lever of profit growth. So please don't leave it to guesswork. There are plenty of ways that can be used to help you get a better understanding of what your customers are really willing to pay. So there we go. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure talking to you today about this subject. If you have any queries on this, please feel free to reach out and get in touch. A lot of the information that I've shared with you today is in my new book, which at the time of speaking is due out in January 2023. I'll leave you with our contact details, but you'll find further information, of course, on our website. Thank you very much for listening.